Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here. This is the last episode of this season of questioning. And today we're going to talk about something that actually is really important for me. And I think for everyone that comes from a dysfunctional family and maybe they're very apart from the real concept of conditional and unconditional love. And today we have an expert in the house. We have Ivonne Harting. She has a master of science in psychology, and also she had more than 5 years of experience. And she specializes in family and marriage therapy, professional counseling, addiction, trauma, and sexuality. So she's perfect for this. So today we're gonna do this. We're gonna talk about a lot of stuff. We're gonna talk about attachment theories that it's been really like famous lately on social media, and how does that relate to understanding actually what conditional and unconditional love is, and how we can just build this self perception about ourselves as part of our like their reality that we're living in, and also how are we operating in a relationship when we are actually aware of the type of attachment we have. So welcome. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure. And well, how are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here. Spaces like these are really, really important so that we access valuable information that hopefully will allow people in their personal journey.
Yeah, I think it's really important to talk about this. I was thinking a lot about why should I talk about this, maybe from another perspective, because now like everyone is talking about this. And I think that it's very dangerous sometimes because there's a lot of influencers and platforms that are like talking about this and making mockery about this topic.
Yeah.
And when you realize that you come from maybe an anxious or an avoiding attachment, I think it's actually like understanding that and understanding where you come from. Because I think at the end, and let's start talking about this, whatever type of attachment you have, it's related to the type of family dynamic you had. And I don't know if that's like that. I don't know if you can explain a little bit more about it.
Yeah, definitely. So the family system is our debut into socialization. Like it's the first experience of socialization that we have, and the relationship that we have with our caregivers, if they are present, if they're supportive, if they give us love or not, affect the way that we go about our relationship with ourselves and also our interpersonal relationships in general, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I read for the first time, I think I wrote Attachment, which is like this book that everyone has now. And I realized that, oh, I really resonate with the anxious attachment style. I grew up in a family with not available, like not emotional available parents, and I never learned how to self-regulate. And I got really, really triggered and anxious when I am in a relationship because I fall deep and hard. Like it's like the first week, and I'm imagining like my trips and how my life will be with a person. And I was like, why can I be? Why can I go? Little by little, and why can I just create a healthier dynamic where I feel secure about the person? It was always me like not trusting or thinking that I have to control and give more, more, more for the person to stay in my life. And it was exhausting. And I don't know if you're related to this, but I think this is my experience. And it was actually really painful because it's not something you can control because you are not conscious that you have that, right?
Of course, until you are.
Until
If you ever are, which is like the ideal situation of finding a way to develop the self-awareness that you need so that you can evaluate what attachment style you have, because it's not definitive. It's not like, okay, I came from this dysfunctional family. I was never modeled assertive communication. I never learned how to self-regulate or manage my emotions. I'm impaired. I'm never going to be able to do it. That's not the case, but it does take a lot of work, a lot of insight, a lot of practice. And it also requires being able to reparent yourself, which is a big, big concept in psychology, which is basically doing for yourself what your parents couldn't do for you. So opening a space. Yeah.
it sounds very complicated. Right?
It is very complex. It's very tough. Ideally, these processes would be accompanied by a specialist, a therapist, someone that can orient you in the right direction. But it's a lot about healing that part of you that feels subjected to a specific type of functioning emotionally because of what you grew up around and what you were told about yourself. It comes from seeing the relationship between your parents to maybe even relationships with siblings, and kind of trying to build a form or self identity from that.
Yeah, I think that's really important because you said two things that caught my attention. And it was the first thing, it was like, your self image and what you believe about yourself. It's like you take it for granted that you are not deserving of love. Like you're not deserving of like someone. Oh, that's what I thought in my case, for example, right? I felt like I was not enough and I was easily replaceable. So for me, it was always getting into this survival mode when I just have to pretend I was someone that I was not. And I will feel all this anger and rage. And I thought that everyone was stupid and everyone should um, regulate my emotions. It was like it's their responsibility to make me feel good. And at the end, when you sit down and you think, and I'm saying this because the second thing that I want to say, and you said it, is like you need to identify it, but you also need the right like process to understand what is happening with an specialist. And what I'm saying this because for me, and this is something we've talked about before, spirituality at the beginning was like a way of understanding my emotions. And my first experience with a psychologist was actually very traumatizing. And I
That
think I want to talk about this because I want to break that myth and debunk that myth that every psychologist is like terrifying, or everyone's like, no, but I'm gonna get spiritual instead of understanding my deep psyche. And at the end, it's like there's some things that even spirituality helped you a lot to process your emotions and regulate your emotions. You're not getting into the root of the problem. It's like you're not understanding the behavioral pattern. And I think that that's the reason why at the end for me it was like, okay, so I need a psychologist because I've been doing yoga and Reiki and all that stuff for years, which is amazing because it helped me to rediscover and my relationship with my body also, because I think sexuality also is like very very influenced by the type of attachment you have and the relationship
for
with
sure.
your body. I don't know if you can explain a little bit more, but the point is like having the right consult like therapies and practices. You can do both, but I don't think you should, and this is my personal opinion, right? Someone that has been doing both things at the same time, it's complementary. Like spirituality and mindfulness and wellness practices are complementary. But when you have a deep conditioning in your mind of who you are that comes from all that trauma that maybe you throw to your subconscious mind and you're not processing, it's important to have someone that brings you to reality and say, hey, from this age to this age, this happened, and you need to reparenting yourself in that moment and tell you that you are worth it, you deserve love, you can be a secure person. And that's the dialogue. Like everyone talks about manifest, and manifest at the end is just putting in paper something. But if you don't do anything to manifest what you have in paper, it's just not going to happen. I don't know what you think
Right.
about it and the relationship with sexuality.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of important things that you said, especially that correlation between your relationship with yourself and your body and how that affects the way that you're able to practice love. For example, you establish interpersonal relationships in a probably maladaptive way if you come from a dysfunctional family and you haven't provided the space for yourself to be able to question why that is, where that comes from, because everybody's experience is very unique. And the way our mind works is to protect us from anything that's harmful. So you might just go about your day to day thinking that that's just who you are and that there's no explanation behind it. But there actually is, for every person, a story behind their functioning. If you practice I like to call them like pseudosciences. If you put your faith in them, they will have a sort of placebo effect. There's people that are certain that their astrological sign is going to absolutely determine their personality, maybe the way they project a romantic relationship, right? Like if you're a Virgo and I'm a Pisces, like I don't think maybe that would work
We're
out.
compatible.
Ideal because of this, things like that.
It's more about what's your attachment style. That's what you
More
should
about
ask.
that and where that comes from, because people that have an anxious attachment style typically didn't have a household where they were empowered or supported as individuals. They didn't have a space to be heard or feel support, right? So the fear then stems in feeling like you're going to be abandoned, like you're not enough, like there has to be constant reassurance. The attachment style is more, I found my safe place within myself, and I don't really want to involve myself with outside risk, right? Not that I don't want it, because that's the thing. It's not that avoidant attachment styles do not want love, but their way
crave it, actually,
of protecting themselves is isolating themselves and not giving a space for this emotional interaction to happen at all, because it's scary. And then there's the mix between both of anxious avoidance, where it's exactly the perfect way of symbolizing that conflict of, I want love, I actually crave it, yearn it, but I'm really scared of it. It hasn't really turned out great for me, because the main source of love we expect to have like lies in our nuclear family, mainly mom and dad. So when people don't prioritize like self-knowledge, that's where erratic functioning comes to play. And you'll notice people getting into relationships and then they're unfaithful, then they're not honest about what they want, then they maybe play with people's feelings, or that's how it's perceived, because there hasn't been that responsibility of, let me question why I do this, because there comes a certain point in time where we're old enough that we can look back and see these patterns. And yes, it can come from mom and dad, but the person responsible of changing it is you.
Yeah. Oh my God. Say it again.
We can't blame mom and dad forever. We can't say
like
that
when we get into adulthood, it's just not possible anymore. Maybe for a little bit, it's okay to blame them, especially when you're like, I mean, and I would like to share the message of it's okay if you blame them a little bit. Because they were responsible. They were the adults.
Right.
But it comes a moment in your life that is like, oh, I have 30. Now what? And you've been getting into this, because there are talks. That's the real meaning of toxic. And it happened to me. I think I've been with narcissists before, and with people that were also anxious avoidant or the organized avoidant, whatever. And it's just like, it's exhausting, because what happened, I was very regulated, like in my last experience. And it was like, I think I'm okay. But the dynamic started like, these people at the beginning was like super secure, made me feel like he was so excited to be with me. But like gradually he will start pulling away, like in such an aggressive way that I was like, and that activated my anxious. It was like, I think I was good. And what am I feeling like? I have to delete the conversation in my phone, because I was so anxious that this person might not reach me back. And then I was starting with this core belief, I'm not worth it. Of course, he's not going to want me. Of course, I'm not worthy. Of course, why will he be with me? So that kid that was very wounded, that was never accepted or never had a space to cry or to be upset or to laugh, or someone telling her, hey, I got you. Because in a way, I had parents that were never there. And I'm sure that this is important. I think it's not because they didn't want to, because in some cases it's because they also have these old things that they hadn't processed. and they have no way of doing it. And I think we come from
Yeah.
that past generation where my mom comes with like a very strict Spanish, like European family. And my grand was like, if you cry, go to bed and you won't have dinner. So it's like
Oh, wow.
yeah, she grew up with that. She couldn't cry, she couldn't like feel, so she got into this survival mode. And I know this because I got into therapy with my mom, like regular therapy and spiritual therapy, to recreate a relationship and open a table, like a conversation when we can say, okay, this is what happened, this is what happened, I'm sorry about this, I didn't notice about this. And I think this is very important because what
Super
I'm saying,
important.
like, it's cool that you blame your parents, but they're humans too. And at the end,
Yeah.
if they're not sick in the head, if they're not narcissists, or they have like a really hard
Personality
problem,
disorder.
if they're like human and they made mistakes. I had this conversation with my dad. It was very crazy, like 2 years ago, and he will start crying. And he will tell me like, I'm sorry that I never knew how to be a dad, because I never had a dad that like taught
That
me
showed me how.
how to be a dad. And it's like, and it's crazy because at the end you can forgive them, but there's some things, and this is something I want to ask you. I feel like even if I went into this deep healing process psychologically and spiritually, I think there's some things that they're never gonna stop triggering you, no matter how secure is a relationship. What do you think can we do, or how can you think we can create, therefore, a healthy relationship with ourselves when we know this, and start, like, stop getting into this toxic patterned kind of relationships with avoiding anxious, because it's going to be a toxic cycle all the time, unless both are really 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 conscious of whatever that is happening, which is really weird. I tried. I tried with this guy, was like, hey, I am anxious attached, and I've been reading about this theory that I think you would really like it. And his answer was like, I don't like you, try to fix me. So for me,
Okay.
that was very delicate. So how would you recommend, like, someone that is maybe in a long-term relationship and they just realize that they've been in this deactivating and activating dynamics? How can we self-regulate, and when we know it's good to stay in that relationship or just move on?
Okay. So the first step is like individual self-awareness of like knowing what activates you, what your triggers are. And a lot of that has to do with your nervous system. So like you
Okay.
mentioned, there are things that you will find triggering because they stem from deep trauma and they will continue to be triggering. You can learn how to navigate them better or cope with them. But when you're in an interpersonal relationship, the most important thing is to be able to communicate these triggers, right? These activators, and what you need from your partner to feel supported. For
Okay.
some people, that's okay, we got into an argument. You made me feel, because of this thing that you said, that you're not invested in the relationship, or that's my appreciation. So this activates feelings of abandonment tied to my relationship with my mother.
Yeah.
So I would need to have a conversation with you to clarify this emotional response that I'm having. But it's not that it's the other person's responsibility to make you feel any type of way, but they should be able to, or be willing to, kind of learn what type of presence you need in
Yeah.
that moment. Like I, for example, when I'm triggered and it like stems back to deep, complex trauma, I need to be by myself. And then I
Okay.
can go back and have a conversation about it. If I have a conversation in the moment,
I'm
it
like
will
that too.
typically not end well because I haven't been
Fight.
able to process my emotions since I wasn't modeled that and I didn't learn how to do that. I'm learning now. I'm not able to maybe process and understand my emotions as quickly as someone that comes from a functional family,
Yeah, secure
has
attachment.
received, yeah, and has secure attachment. Because you shouldn't feel like a relationship is on the verge of ending or that you should run away from it, right? That's like anxious attachment. You might have both. if you have secure,
I'm done. This is over. This person
this is
doesn't love
over.
me
Yeah.
anymore.
We get into like catastrophic thinking, like,
what can I do to earn their love? What
exactly.
can I do to earn their trust? Like, if you did something to break it, like you
Yeah.
didn't do anything to break it, why you should fight to gain it? I think that's the most painful thing with the anxious and avoidant relationship. Like, they can't trust you because they can't, even if they want, and you are trying to earn trust and love when the only thing you have done is just be there for them and trying to love them. So
And sometimes,
that's another reality. It's like
yeah,
working in another reality for the
completely.
two of them. Well,
And then anxious attachment might not be able to tolerate there being a conflict or miscommunication without it being addressed ASAP. And avoidance style maybe will need time and space to be able to process things and will maybe avoid the conflict in general. So it's very tough to meet each other in the middle, which is key in interpersonal relationships, especially romantic ones. But the responsible thing to do is know what you need and then learn how to vocalize it without making your partner responsible for your emotional reactivity or for how you feel. Because we have the responsibility to take care of ourselves and understand ourselves. It's not your partner's responsibility to understand you, but it is their responsibility to be honest about what they can offer you. And if that's aligned with what you want and need and what their wants and needs are, and if there needs to be some negotiation or reevaluation of things, and if the dynamic needs some work, which most of them do, especially because polar opposites tend to attract. So it is very like that an anxious person will pursue a relationship with an avoidant attachment style. So the idea is to make it a safe space for everybody, respecting the main differences that there are. There's people that are very open and able to communicate their emotions without trouble. There's people that have a really hard time. They don't like it. That stems, again, from their type of relationship with their primary caregivers. That's 100% like it's evidence-based. Like, we know that this affects people. So breaking these patterns requires like a very intense process, and it's not fun. It's not fun most of the time, but it is relieving, and it is healthy to understand why you act the way that you act.
I think you give you a type of freedom, like an unknown freedom that you might not be related or like not familiarized with. And also, I think the message at the end is like, you have to understand that this is not linear. That sometimes you can feel very regulated, but I think that, and that's the trap of the healing loop. I always said, like, when you really come from this, and it's a very traumatic past, your path, it's never gonna be linear. And that's in a way, it's a responsibility. Like, when you're getting into a relationship, like, you be really honest of who you are, of where you come from. And this is not easy, because I thought many times, like, fuck, if I share my trauma, they're gonna reject me. If I just say that this happened. And also trauma bonding, more than attachment, like avoiding an anxious attachment. So what happened is, like, in my experience also, it was not just he being avoidant and I am being anxious. It was, we shared the same family wounds. Like, my mom had addictions, his mom had addictions. So it was like, oh, this feels like home.
Yeah.
Because we understanding each other so much. Who gonna understand me the same way? No one is gonna understand the same pain. And it's like, it's okay, because it's okay to connect with someone and understand how the other person feel. But emotional availability, I always hate this word. Availability, I think that's the way you say it. I hate this word. It's
You're
like
saying it right.
something in my tongue. Like, it's so important. And sitting down, and that's these people getting into these dating apps, just hurting people because they have no time to process, or they have no emotional responsibility. And I think, and karma is a bitch. And I always like to say this just because it's so important for you to stop making excuses. And and I know that, so like loneliness is something really scary for a lot of people. And a statistic said that 80% of people that are in dating apps because they're feeling lonely. But that doesn't mean they know what they need or how to present themselves. Like, I remember I was having this conversation with this guy. We were talking, and he was like, no, I don't feel like it. I am, I think my depression puts me in these loops of not wanting to go out. And I'm like, I asked him this. That was after I was with a narcissist, and I understood my anxious attachment style. I was like, do you know when that happened, how would you like someone to hold space for you? That's the only thing I asked. And he was 35, and he said to me, I have no idea. And in that moment for me, this is not my job and this is not my place. Because I know that if I get into a dynamic with someone that is just in that process of pain, and they have been doing that for years, and they had yet not find a way to self-regulate, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the mom role just to please them. And that's, for me, was so triggering, because it's like, oh, now I know, going through that experiences, that this is not the dynamic I want in my life, because it's gonna trigger me. Not because I am not willing to, but sometimes the way we were created and molded in our development as human beings can determine if we actually can get into certain type of relationship with certain type of people that have certain type of psychological patterns. And
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 behavioral patterns too.
and it yeah, and it's a responsible it was a responsible decision. It's like, or maybe when I'm getting, like, now my boyfriend, like, I just got a boyfriend. Like, I just gotta tell you, no, I'm kidding.
You just bought it at the store?
Yeah. I was just getting into this relationship, and he was so, like, secure. Oh, he never made me feel like I need to earn his trust. He said something to me like, this is the way it works. I give you all my trust. You have everything, because we're starting a relationship, and you don't have to fight. You don't have to earn my love. Ivonne, for me, that was like, wait, no. Maybe I don't like this guy. That was my question. Like, that in my head, that was my question. It was like, this is just not right. Wait, when I have to put my gloves and fight the battle and be the knight with the sword, earning the love. It's just like, because that's the conception of romantic relationships that we've been getting from movies and literature and poetry and art.
And you gotta fight for it, yeah.
So it's like, you don't have to fight for it. It's just like we've been taught to fall in love with psychopaths. Edward Cullen is a psychopath. He's an avoidant psychopath. Because he's like, and I love him, and I love it. It's so stupid when we think about it. But Dorian Gray, all these personalities that are based in like sins, that are so attractive. At the end, it's just like a reflection of how we actually relate. And I'm sorry to say this and break everyone's heart, but romantic relationship doesn't work. Maybe the sustainable ones, when you are getting older, you just realize you want a healthy dynamic, and it's more about a partnership and sharing things. And you said something that is very important. When you are getting into a relationship with someone, you need to have the whole picture, and it will take time to build trust. Because the way I build trust, and I told him, like, okay, you give me all your trust, but I don't trust you 100%. That's going to be a process. That the way I build trust is different the way you are giving me your trust, just because our experiences are different. And I think that I want to kind of close this, and I don't know if you want to say something about it, but I want to close letting people know why it's so important, not just for us, but I think for our future generations, breaking with the loop, like stopping this eternal loop that is also generational. Because it's been like, our mother was like that, my grandmother was like that, and I realized I did like spiritual thing that is about family constellations.
Mhm.
Just is basically understanding the trauma that comes from your past generations. Uh, and all the patterns that was just like, from my grandmother to my mom, from my grandfather to my dad, and understanding it. And okay, this is the good things I have for my mom. These are the bad things I have for my mom. How I am going to operate that to become more me. And that's for me what's breaking the loop. Like if I visualize myself having a family in the future or a partner, will be like, even it and now I'm seeing in therapy the reason why it was so hard for me to let go of that past relationship, because it was so familiar to be in a traumatic situation that my, like, unconsciously I was very attached to that. And my therapist told me, like, what do you miss? And I'm like, well, you don't miss him. Next question. Well, you don't miss him. Next question. I was like, well, and I was like, start crying, because you're like, you don't miss that. You miss the trauma bonding, because that's what you're used to. Um, so I wanna have your opinion on this. This has been so great. Like I because I think it's so important and so human. I think it's very calming when you realize that being you, even if you have trauma, is more than okay. You don't need to know everything or have everything figured out when you are processing your trauma. You just need to be surrounded with the right support system in order to break that loop. I don't know what you think about this.
Yeah, no, it's very important, especially to like break the cycle, because intergenerational trauma is a thing. It's been deeply studied. And Carl Jung has a really great quote that I like that says that what we don't make conscious, we're basically condemned to repeat. So if we don't, again, like find a space, and this doesn't necessarily happen on the first try. You said you had, for example, a very traumatizing experience with one of your therapists. There's different approaches, there's different needs that people have, right, in these particular spaces. But through the process of going through like that dark, scary closet of our unconscious mind and our repressed trauma, are we able to actually build the version of ourselves that will allow us to thrive in the ways that we expect to? Because we're not solely identified by our trauma. Absolutely everybody has trauma, but the only way we can heal it is by prioritizing that space for ourselves, and also allowing ourselves the opportunity to trial and error, right? Like, trauma comes from relationships. If a human lived alone on the world, I don't think they would necessarily be traumatized. Usually trauma comes from relationships,
Yeah.
and it's healed through relationships, through having different types of relationships and trying and making changes and having uncomfortable conversations, mainly with yourself, which is tough. That's why a therapist needs to like do the digging and
Yeah.
like poke at you, because you are a person that has defense mechanisms, and these defense mechanisms allow you to function day to day, whether they be adaptive or not, without spiraling down the trauma hole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So before you get into a relationship, check your relationship with yourself. What are you going to bring to the table if you decide to cross paths with another person? Are you going to add value to their lives? Are you going to take their energy? What are you going to do? What do you expect from this relationship? And these are the classic, like, avoided topics in first dates, but it's okay for people to know what they want, how they want it, and to express it openly. Like, that's healthy. Unhealthy is to want something and say otherwise or behave otherwise. That is what causes like interpersonal conflict. So if you know pretty much what your trauma is and you're pursuing the process of healing it, that's more than enough. Like, that's what you need to do
That's when
so
your
that
hero
you
journey starts. Like when you know that maybe the path that you're going through is not clear, like crystal clear. However, you just go. It's just like I have to do it, and I have to do it, and I don't know what's going on. It's like I think deciding to be in love, it's also deciding like you have to get into it with a mindset that you might get hurt, someone can break your heart,
Yeah.
things can go great, but it's that decision, like, am I gonna live through love and whatever the consequence that comes with it, or I'm gonna live through fear, avoiding, I'm gonna avoid everything, and you start like repressing all these feelings, and you create a monster inside of you, all repressed and fearful and anxious at the same time, because you crave intimacy. Because I think that's what happened with avoidant. They crave intimacy, but then when they get really close, they're like, they're gonna hurt me, so I'm just gonna pull back. But I want to express that I need them, so I'm projecting. So it's really complicated. And I think what you're saying is so important in that phrase. It's just like, I think even if you're avoiding for a long period of time, whatever it's around you, it's gonna, I mean, I think it's gonna come a moment in your life when that's gonna slap you in the face.
For sure.
And it's
Without
gonna
a doubt.
hurt 100 times more than if you just accepted it at the beginning. With this, I don't want to say that my process has to be your process or anyone else's process. I think at the end, that's the reason why questioning was born, the podcast. And I think that's the reason why I'm opening spaces, because it's like, if I can talk to myself in my early 20s, I will say so many different things, right? And for someone that is listening to these and they feel like they're getting into, or they're having a very bad relationship with themselves, and it's hard for them to accept themselves or to open up. It doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert. I don't think that matters, like, at all. You gotta change. You gotta change. I was very, very extroverted. I think I still have this protagonist type of personality, but I know when to shut up. I know when to go inwards and say, hey, why is this happening? Why are you feeling like this? And having that one-on-one conversation with yourself in the mirror, when you say, you're acting like this because of this. So you need to be conscious, and also you need a system in order to process it and go out of that zone. So yeah, I think it's great. I think having these spaces, I don't know, I would like you to, of course, like, share if you're working right now, if someone actually like watch this interview and they need, like, they want to reach you, how can they ask for support? Because I know that maybe the major problem here in the States, and I think outside too, is like people don't have that much access to how they can get help. Because like you said, and I'm going to go back to the main point, like spirituality and holistic things are great, but when you have a deep conditioning in your mind about who you are, and it's hard to accept yourself, and even it's hard to create intimacy with someone, and we all want intimacy and connection with our romantic partner, and when we realize that it's just like, it's us with not being able to, because we don't know what is going on, we need someone to help us. So I think I would like you to explain a little bit about this, because we're going to wrap it up soon. And yeah, if someone wants to have help or wants, like, to reach you out, how can they do that?
Okay, so I'm provisionally licensed in the state of Colorado. So people who reside in the state of Colorado are predominantly the people that I would be able to work with strictly clinically. However, I do offer consultations that are more aligned with what would be kind of like a coaching approach, which would be able to anybody within the United States, also Venezuela, which is where we're originally from. I'm fully licensed over there and able to talk to anybody that might need help. I'm a pretty open person. I have people that reach out to me via social media, mainly Instagram, maybe share a little bit of what they're going through, and I will give them like the resources that they need. Sometimes that might be me. Sometimes that might be a colleague. Sometimes that's a community resource. For example, a big one that I like to give out is 988, which is the National Suicide Hotline. They're open 24/7. You don't have to be experiencing suicidal ideation to talk to someone. They are counselors They're crisis response specialists, and they're able to talk to anybody who needs support, who might be just feeling lonely. And it's a very, very great, like, reliable resource. The thing that I would recommend, like, if I were to leave people with an action that they might be able to take, would be for sure journaling, like taking your time to exteriorize your emotions, because it's very difficult to understand where everything comes from when there's like a mental turmoil or when there's overthinking. So trying to get things down on paper so that you can later revisit them and learn about yourself, how you're functioning, and then be able to determine your needs. There's people that want to work on specific trauma, family, relationships. There's people that want to make career decisions. So that's a different type of counseling that they would go to. So it really depends on what you're experiencing, but definitely give yourself the opportunity to know your trauma before it ends up catching up to you, because that's the one thing that we cannot avoid, no matter how bad we want to.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, for taking the time of open space to talk about this. Because I know you and I know me, and it's just amazing having the opportunity of connecting and bonding this way to talk about something that help us, I think, in a way. And also the message I want to give to people with this is we all go through shit, any type of, but we are not a problem. So the more you are yourself and you accept yourself as the way you are, understanding that you have to be responsible and show yourself accountable for whatever that's going on in your mind, everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for being here again. I'm gonna wrap it up, and if anyone wants to get help, please pay attention what Ivonne said at the end. You can listen to it again so you can take some notes. And I'm gonna share your info when I post this so everyone can have access to you and to your work, because it's amazing what you do. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
Have a great day.
You too.